The morning of my wedding was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. I remember standing in front of the mirror, staring at myself in a white dress I had dreamed about since childhood. The room smelled like roses and expensive perfume. My bridesmaids were laughing softly behind me while the makeup artist added the final touches to my face. Everything looked perfect, but deep inside, something felt wrong. Daniel hadn't answered any of my calls since the night before. At first, I told myself he was probably busy. Weddings are stressful. Maybe his phone battery died. Maybe he was with the groomsmen preparing for the ceremony. But as the hours passed, the silence became unbearable. I called him again, and again, and again. Nothing. His phone stayed switched off. My maid of honor tried to calm me down. She smiled nervously and said, maybe he's just having last-minute nerves. But Daniel wasn't the type to disappear. We had been together for 6 years. 6 years of memories, promises, and plans for our future. He knew how much this wedding meant to me. That's why fear slowly began creeping into my heart. Then my father walked into the bridal suite. I will never forget the look on his face. He looked pale, worried, almost broken. The room immediately went silent. "Sweetheart," he whispered softly. The moment he said that word, I knew something was terribly wrong. "What happened?" I asked. He hesitated before answering. "We can't find Daniel." My entire body froze. I felt the air leave my lungs. "What do you mean you can't find him?" His best man stepped forward and explained that Daniel had left his apartment early that morning, but nobody knew where he went. His car was still parked outside. His phone was off. Nobody had heard from him. I kept waiting for someone to say it was all a misunderstanding. But nobody did. Outside, the church was already full of guests waiting for the ceremony to begin. Family members, friends, co-workers, everyone was there. And I was trapped inside a nightmare. For nearly 2 hours, my family tried to hide the truth while people whispered among themselves. Some guests thought Daniel had gotten cold feet. Others believed he had run away. Every whisper felt like a knife stabbing into my chest. I was humiliated, heartbroken, confused. Finally, I couldn't hide anymore. I picked up my dress and walked into the church alone. The music stopped immediately. Hundreds of eyes turned toward me. Some people looked shocked. Others looked sorry for me. I felt my hands shaking as I stood near the altar where Daniel was supposed to be waiting. But he wasn't there. I swallowed the lump in my throat and forced myself to speak. "I am sorry," I whispered. "The wedding is cancelled." Gasps filled the church. I could hear people murmuring as tears rolled down my face. At that moment, I felt like my entire world had collapsed in front of everyone I knew. That night, I sat alone in the apartment Daniel and I shared together. The wedding gifts were still stacked in the corner. The decorations we had spent months choosing together suddenly felt cruel. Every single thing reminded me of him. His jacket hanging on the chair. His toothbrush beside mine. The framed engagement photo on the wall. I kept staring at our smiling faces, wondering how someone who loved me could disappear without a word. Why? That question haunted me every second. Why would the man I trusted most abandon me on the most important day of my life? 3 days passed. Then 4. Still no call. No message. Nothing. I barely ate. I barely slept. Then on the 4th evening, someone knocked on my door. I thought it was probably my mother checking on me again. But when I opened the door, I saw a woman standing there holding the hand of a little boy. The child looked about 5 years old. The woman looked nervous and exhausted. "Are you Sarah?" she asked quietly. I nodded slowly. Then she looked at me with tears in her eyes and said something that changed my life forever. The woman looked nervous and exhausted. "Are you Sarah?" she asked quietly. I nodded slowly. Then she looked at me with tears in her eyes and said something that changed my life forever. "I think you deserve to know the truth." My heart immediately started pounding. She introduced herself as Rebecca. Then she gently placed her hand on the little boy's shoulder. "This is Daniel's son." I felt the ground disappear beneath me. "No," I whispered. "That's impossible." Rebecca reached into her bag and pulled out several photographs. Photos of Daniel holding the child. Photos of birthdays, hospital visits, family moments. Years of memories I knew nothing about. My hands trembled as I looked through them. The man I was supposed to marry had been living a completely different life behind my back. Rebecca explained everything through tears. Years ago, she and Daniel had been together. When she became pregnant, Daniel panicked. He left, but secretly stayed involved in the child's life. And recently, their son had become seriously ill. Daniel had returned to help them. He said he was going to tell you the truth after the wedding, Rebecca admitted softly. After the wedding, I couldn't believe it. The man I loved planned to marry me while hiding an entire child from me. I felt anger rising inside me. Not just anger. Betrayal. Every memory suddenly felt fake. All the times he disappeared unexpectedly. The mysterious phone calls. The emotional distance during the last few months. The signs had always been there. But love made me blind. That night, after Rebecca left, I cried harder than I ever had before. Not because the wedding was cancelled, but because the future I believed in had never truly existed. For months, I struggled to move on. People talked about me everywhere. Some called me the woman whose groom ran away. Others pitied me. I hated leaving the house because I could feel the judgment in people's eyes. But slowly, things began to change. I started focusing on myself again. I traveled to places I had always wanted to visit. I spent more time with friends and family. I learned how to laugh again. And little by little, the pain stopped controlling my life. Then nearly a year later, I received a letter. It was from Daniel. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside, he apologized for everything. He admitted he had wanted to tell me the truth many times but kept choosing fear instead. Then I reached the final sentence. And suddenly, tears filled my eyes again. You deserved honesty long before you deserved a wedding. I read those words over and over again. And for the first time in a very long time, I finally felt peace. Not because I forgave him, but because I understood something important. Sometimes the most painful endings save us from even greater heartbreak later. Losing Daniel broke me, but it also saved me from spending my life married to lies. And eventually, I realized something beautiful. The wedding day I thought destroyed my future was actually the day my real life began.